Welcome to Everyday Martial Artist, a weekly podcast where you'll join me, Brian Doucette, as I interview a different martial artist each episode and hear their story. Some guests you may have heard of, and some you probably haven't. Be sure to subscribe where all your favorite podcasts are available. Also visit our website at everydaymartialartist.com. If you're listening for a specific interview, I sure hope you'll stay and check out the other episodes. A very special thank you to Topher Williams for our custom theme music. And now, the newest episode of Everyday Martial Artist. Everyday Martial Artist is brought to you by KOOnline.com for all your martial arts needs. Sparring and safety gear, rank belts, uniforms, weapons, patches, and more. Wholesale supplies made by martial artists for martial artists. Visit us today at ko-online.com. Hello and welcome to Everyday Martial Artist. I'm your host, Brian Doucette, and as we do every week, we're joined by a brand new guest talking about their life and journey throughout the world of martial arts and other stuff they're involved in. My guest today has over 50 years of experience in the martial arts. He's a first-generation personal student of late Grandmaster Remy Presas, the father and founder of Modern Arnis. The Black Belt Hall of Fame named him Weapons Instructor of the Year in 2007, and in 2008, Action Martial Arts Magazine and their Martial Arts Hall of Fame named him Grandmaster of the Year. Currently travels worldwide teaching seminars on the use of blunt and edged weapons to other martial artists, civilians, law enforcement, and military. He has designed and holds patents in knife design and operation. And to go with these knives, he's also designed full training programs in a modular train-the-trainer format, allowing anyone to learn the skills needed in a short amount of time. Please welcome my guest today, Mr. Bram Frank. How are you doing today, sir?
Very good, Brian. Thank you for having me on. And, I thought about that as you were saying my bio and realized that the written bio is actually almost 10 years old.
Oh, wow.
Because I'll be turning 71 this July. And I'm like, well, yeah, I started, in 63.
Wow.
So it's,
okay.
Yeah. Anyways, it's just not that at this age, what's a couple of years? Doesn't matter.
Well, that's why I started that, because a few times I had that and I had the information wrong. And I'm like, they have 40 years of experience. And I go, actually, I have 50. So I said over 50 years. So even if it's 60, I'm still right.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
That's right.
But I was just with Uncle Bill, William DeTwars, and I started to say something. And he just turned 88. And I know he laughed at me and goes, "You're still a young kid." And I'm like, thank God when I'm with you and with Hanchi Ron Carlson, who's also 6 months younger than Uncle Bill. And they both went, "Bram, to us, you're a kid." And I'm like, wow, someone calls me a kid. That's cool.
I know. I think I had a few of my, Bill Wallace called me a kid. A couple other of my guests I think Ron Van Cleef might have referred to me as a kid too. So,
right.
And I'm like, I turned 50 this year, and I'm coming up this June will be my 40th year in martial arts. So you got me by a few years, but still not bad.
Yeah. And I've told people that in real life, a decade of life can matter.
Yeah, definitely.
Of what we do. And so I told you before we actually got on, all you listeners, I had told Brian I wouldn't say anything. So my daughter, who shall remain sort of nameless, always goes, "Dad, you're an old white knight dinosaur." And I'm like, thanks. That's great. She goes, "You're old."
Kids.
And I go, thanks. Yeah, exactly. So.
Well, kind of what we do, how I like kicking things off on the show is I want to go back to the very beginning. I want to know where that interest came from, that first spark that kind of kicked off your martial arts journey and started you down that path.
Okay. I think I can remember that far back. I was brought up by a family that we loved to read. My mom was a teacher. My dad also was a teacher. I come from a family of Mensons, which is neither here nor there. And my dad used to, when he was at University of Pennsylvania and Philadelphia College of Art and Design, he worked in the museums restoring armor, paintings, that kind of stuff as he came up through. So he was always into ancient Chinese and Japanese stuff. And my mom loves ancient, and I just fell in love with arms and armor. And my family would say, I'd go to the Metropolitan Museum, and I lived on like the third floor, over by the arms and armor, never went anywhere else. I have lots of books. I wanted to be a knight in shining armor. I read when I was very young. I read adult books when I was very, very young, and I was the only child in Fairfield, Connecticut, which is, from old colonial times.
Yep.
We still actually have Kings Highway. The library, there was a separate children's library and a big old-fashioned adult library, and children were not allowed in the adult library. Well, the chief librarian, Ruth Wenton, lived around the corner from us, and she and my mom were in school system together. And since I read adult books as a kid, I was one of the only children allowed in. So I had access to adult books on arms and armor and old great Greek myths and Norse myths. And I always wanted to be an old fashioned, for better or lack of words, a knight at King Arthur's court. Because there's all sorts of knights from every culture, but that's what I wanted to be. So I studied arms and armor. And my dad would tell me about, Japanese warriors and whatever. And because I read, I had Teddy Roosevelt's books that my grandfather had given me about hunting and what he did. And of course, he was a judo fanatic. So here's, so all of that added to it that's what I wanted to do. And my friends had no idea. And my dad also helped teach Japanese and Chinese brush painting at Yale. My dad was the late artist illustrator Robert Gould. In real life, he had to do ID and engineering, but what he did on the side. So, I grew up with all of his artist friends. People go, how'd you know all those people? I was a kid. I was with my dad. I was too little to say anything else. And I helped that, so they go, how'd you know Frank Frazetta and Jack Kirby and all that kind of stuff? And I went and, Bud Riley and, the group that hung with my father and Peter Smith. And I'm like, I didn't know them per se. I went to life class with them. I went to art. I went to all, painted with them, drew with them. Why? Because my dad was friends with them, not me.
Right.
I was a little kid. What do I know? So anyways, all of that stuff helped spark an interest of wanting to do it. And I was dying to do martial arts. And I'm a good Jewish kid, and Jewish kids don't do martial arts according to those things. They told my mom all the reasons it would ruin my hands and I'd never be an artist, which did nothing for me because that's all I wanted to do. And back then there were no Barnes and Nobles and that kind of stuff. There's only, little bookstores. And I remember we had one by us called the Open Bookstore. And the Open Bookstore, I used to go in, and I was allowed, very poor family when we first started. My mom, Robert Gould is my stepdad. I actually knew my real dad for the first couple of years. And way back then, they finally decided to get an Open Bookstore from Charles Tuttle, the nice martial art company.
Yep.
And they had a book, Karate, The Art of Empty Hand, by Hidetaka, Nishiyama. And, of course, Richard Brown, who translated it. And a couple books by Don Drager. Nice. So my book back then, I just pulled it off the shelf because I didn't want to misquote myself. It's, it has a woven cover, a woven bamboo cover. It's just one of my first stunning books. And it was so expensive. My mother went, this is your one book for the year. It was $7 back then, $7.50.
It's a lot back then.
Wow. Yeah, and I blew my wad on it back then. And it was, but, beautiful step-by-step pictures. It's still my favorite book. And, I got to meet him one time out in New York City back then. But that's why I said, start off, I'm a kid. If I can read, I can learn.
Right.
I read, therefore I am. And people go, what does it mean? I said, well, my mom and my uncle, who were both, my mom a psychologist who actually did lots of testing or whatever, became head psychologist school system, and my uncle, who was head of Kings Park State Mental Hospital as a psychiatrist, were examples of, they'd always tell me about intelligence scale, and I didn't get it because if I wasn't interested, I couldn't do it. And like I said, I read about 2 years old. I was reading one of those, meant to be, you think you're smarter than everyone else. I go, no, but the people with all the test scores think I'm smarter than a lot of people. I can do stupid things, and I'm not interested because, genius level people, because it's a bell curve. Mm-hmm. We come real close because being ultra genius starts getting close to idiot savant, comes real close to then retarded, and then, starts over with low IQ, middle IQ, average IQ, high IQ, very high IQ, genius level, and then back around. It's a bell curve. And I'm always read, and I'm self-taught. So that sparked me because I still have 2 pictures that my dad had when he was storing paintings. I know it's Bram storing, can't see anything. I talk around in a circle. Mm-hmm. He had 2 pictures, one of Musashi and one of 2 samurai, and they're actual Japanese prints on rice paper. Wow. And during the colonial period, they used to collect these and stuff them in the back of American oil paintings around the world because no one cared about Japan back then. And they were worthless. So anybody did stuff, it was rice paper. So they were actually used to preserve American colonial and later period paintings. And my dad, upon restoring the paintings and pulling them apart, found that the museum couldn't care less back then. Same kind of thing. It's an era time. So my dad kept them. So I grew up in my dad's studio, and I've kept them. And people come in looking, and I have a modern print of Japanese samurai below it. As you walk on one of my walls, and people go, what? Oh, my dad passed away. My mom said, I know you'd want these. And I do. And people go, they're not real, are they? And I'm like, actually, yes.
Wow.
But that's how I grew up. There were always samurai in the house when I went to Yale with my dad. And the people who were painting the brush painting with my dad, would tell me about stuff. And then they had a friend, and I apologize to Ajahn, I don't remember his name, an Indian friend, who used to tell me about the Kshatriya and the warrior class of India. And he did Indian martial art when I was very little. Cooked us Indian food, so it was just always around me. So I just did it. But anyway, I think Nishiyama, who has since passed away, it's a beautiful book on Shotokan. And he eventually later in life started doing Tai Chi to soften it. But the pictures and the way it's done, typical Tuttle book, it's stunning. I like that perfection. I like that crisp, whatever. And about that time, I really wanted to, there's still anti-Semitism going on and whatever. And I ended up learning combat Shotokan because, we did some odd Shotokan, but they came around and, you have to pardon me, my brain shorts out every once in a while. Anyways, he came to all the temples so that we could learn to fight the Nazis, and that's what he wanted us to do. Oh, Alex Sternberg. I didn't even find it. I just had I typed in rabbi and went, oh my God, Rabbi Alex Sternberg. So okay. Alex came and taught our group because he wanted to do be preventative, be prophylactic, that we learn how to do all this stuff. And Harvey Kurtzenberg taught one of my friends. And I actually re-met Jerry about 10 years ago back here in Florida. And Jerry goes, didn't you train in New York, with the JDL instructor? And I went, actually, yes. But that's what fired me up because he was like, be right out there. Like Emmy Lichtenfeld had learned from his dad in Bratislava. And he got in trouble because he was not a counter Nazi. He was an anti-Nazi. So he, as a young man with all his skills, went out and fought fascists and Nazis on the street and got himself that he had to leave, which is why he eventually had to emigrate to Israel, or back then, British mandate of Palestine. But they came around to teach us, and that all they did was fire my imagination more. And then because of my dad being more exposed to Chinese stuff, as much as samurai never were a big thing with me, I wanted to be a Chinese Kung Fu Shaolin warrior. Most of my friends had no idea. And as time went on, I had studied with Jun Rhee's cousin, Che Rhee, was right in Milford, the next town over. So I got into, let me go back. Bram, left turn at Albuquerque. An older friend of mine, Paul Van Stone, his girlfriend lived next door, and in a very small community we lived in. They would, quote unquote, babysit and spend time with me. And when he went into the military, he was one of that first group in the U.S. Special Forces. Okay. And he would come home in front of this little tiny maple tree in my front yard, which I went back to see my 50th reunion. And it's this giant maple tree on our old property. But under that tree, he would teach me what he was learning as hand to hand. And all it did was fire me up more. Nice. And that's when I eventually went off to study, with all this little bit of Shotokan combat Shotokan, and what he taught me to do, basically Jun Rhee karate from Che Rhee. Okay. I really wanted to learn Chinese arts, and this school opened up, and he was a judo guy. Again, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting his name. And we actually had the Mikado or Makido, like a credit card. No one had credit cards back then, and it registered we were, kept track of our classes, and he was about an hour away. And he would take the best instructors in that area, and his guys taught the judo program and all the other parts. There's all these different programs, and he tried to get you to do judo, and I'd done some judo and wrestling in school, not very serious, but I really wanted, he offered Hungar. Okay. So I signed up for the Hungar classes. I was having a blast. It was worth the drive. I had a great time. I had just gotten my license, so I went to do this. And present to myself, as I learned it and was being taught to me, eventually, a couple of years in, the instructor had an accident. I'm going to date myself with this now. So he can't come in. I go, what's going to happen? I said, we have a new instructor. A guy comes in with a bowl haircut, little guy, bell bottoms, and platform shoes. And I'm looking at him like, oh, and the very, Beatlemania, 60s type stuff. And I'm like, okay. And he taught with disdain. Teaching Hungar was not his thing. He'd get out and, beautiful form, but little guy bounce around, and I'm like, okay. But you could see he really was not into this class. The previous instructor, been a bigger guy, and he was really into it, very flowery. This guy just wasn't. He was teaching. And I went, And he corners me in class, after class, in the locker room. Says, do you want to learn how to fight? And I'm like, well, isn't that why I'm taking Hungar? And he goes, stop me. He came right down my center line, beat the snot out of me, trapped me up, smacked me. And I went, what's that? And he goes, no questions. Would you like to learn how to fight? And I went, yes. That's cool. And he went, smart guy, of course. And he said, here's what we're going to do. You have to continue to take classes and pay Hungar so no one knows what we're doing. and you have to bring me in twice a week from New York on the train and pay for lessons. I'm like, you got it.
Wow.
So I have no idea what I'm learning. I do my Hungar because I love it, but I'm working with him all the time doing whatever this art is. And eventually he goes, you need to get a training partner. So I remember his name, Bob Terenzio. I can sort of picture him. And his house was actually closer to New York than mine.
Okay.
And locker room after class, they want to learn to fight. And he goes, Bram, what do you think we're learning here? So I do what was done to me. Go right down the center line, smack him around, trap him up. He goes, what's that? I said, I don't know. Where'd you learn it? I said, Steve's teaching me, Steve Chen Lee. He goes, okay. I said, I need a training partner. He said to find someone. You're number 2 in class. I'm picking you. We aren't allowed to question. We'll share the expense of getting him on the train, and we each have to pay him a full fee. Plus, we can't stop here, so people want to know where we've gone or drawn any attention. He goes, okay. So we start. He becomes my training partner. You got to remember it's a 60, so he got us drunk, he got us high. He made us do whole bunches of weird stuff going, you never know what condition you'll be in when you fight. I want you to not your fighting ability to be altered because your brain is altered anyway. And, we ended up training at Bobby's house in his basement. And besides that, I don't remember anything else about Bobby. But the other thing was Bobby couldn't go in on it, but Steve went, why don't you come to Chinatown, come to the Tiger Crane School? And I remember feeling so out of place that I'm the only round guy, everybody speaking Chinese, and I'm the one white round guy there. But the important part was he took me to meet his grandma, and we're going to go see what were the early Shaw Brothers movies at the Chinese theater. No English. And he gets these grandma's got food for us. And of course, I didn't realize by culture, nobody buys food at the theater. They bring their own food with them. So we got our food, and I'm thinking like these donuts, they look like jelly donuts, are hot. We get in, he hands me one. I'm like, yeah, and I eat it, and it's filled with like scrambled eggs and spicy pork. And I'm like, that's my first experience with dim sum.
Nice.
So I have a great time sitting there. I don't understand anything, but the movies come on, and they're not the English versions. What I mean by that is we all see the ones that are tailored for Americans, even if they have lots of Chinese in them and they have some subtitles.
Mm-hmm.
Their versions, each hero comes out, the protagonist and the bad guy, and they do the whole form, the full Chinese form, so what fighting styles are being used in the movie, and then the credits came on and the movie started.
Nice.
And I missed that part, and I was so enamored by it.
Mm-hmm.
But I sat there with my first dim sum, sitting in, a Chinese theater in Chinatown after we go to Tiger Crane School, do some training, and I'd watch movies with him and eat dim sum. Grandma spoke no English, and I fell in love with dim sum, and he took me to a small restaurant that served dim sum at one point, the Namwa. The Namwa in Chinatown is New York's oldest dim sum restaurant in the world. And again, I'm the only round eye in the whole place.
Mm-hmm.
I'm only there because Steve, and I used to go in after that, and I still used to just point. Took my brother there, and the carts would come by, and you just pick it, and they charge you by the plate because the plates are different sizes and colors. And I just love the whole thing. So all of that just added to the depth of martial arts. And it was rolled around 73.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized, because there's still no movies about Wing Chun. So, Jeet Kune Do, people sort of talk about in the arts, and Enter the Dragon comes out. I remember sitting there with Bobby, and we both look at him and go, hey, that's like what we do. Because there are parts, obviously, of JKD in the movie are Wing Chun.
Yeah.
And I went, oh. So it turns out we had been studying Hong Kong Wing Chun from him on the side, and that stuck with me. I remember some Hungar, but Wing Chun became a base for me.
Nice.
And from there, I moved out to Minnesota. I did some Ed Parker Kempo, suffered a very traumatic injury, and when I was trying to recover, I ended up, the people who helped me and opened their school to me, let me clean the floors, the bathrooms. I had no money to earn my way. My wife and I were there. We learned to be Nautilus instructors in another program while we were training, were the Worley brothers and Gordon Franks,
mm-hmm.
who opened up Junri of Minnesota to us in the Bloomington School, which eventually becomes Mid-America Karate, eventually become the Diamond National people, which is how I met Dan Anderson and George Chung and all those people, because of the Diamond Nationals. And I ended up not only being at the school and in charge of the schools, doing stuff, I was always an underbelt there, per se, because I was recovering from my injury, and they were very sweet and testified when I finally made it to court years and years later about my brain damage. And I got to meet good people, and I learned some good stuff. And because of that is also Michael Achanis came out talking about Farang and about what he did for the military. And I'd seen him in Soldier of Fortune, which made me try to delve into different people and find out. They said he had some books that he was, O'Hara Press finally came out, Black Belt Man said, we were doing some of these books, but in it, he talks about books he did for the military that they can't show. So I begged everybody I know with ties to the military to please release them to me, which of course didn't happen, but inspired me because here's a guy doing what I want. He's using weapons. And then comes in at Mid-America, all the guys from Washington, D.C. would get together around the world, and Clarence Murray, Grandmaster Clarence Murray, comes out. He's working with control data, and of course, they gave him use of the school, and he does a weapons demonstration because he's the Psi master, does all the Psi stuff at the big tournaments, as well as the sport fighting. And he shows us Bojutsu, and he shows us the samurai stuff, and he makes sound effects. Now, this doesn't fit with anything Mid-America's doing, trying to start sport karate and eventually start the PKA, with Mike and Sheila Dillard and Gary Hestelow. I almost remembered his wife's name, but, with Gordon Franks and Pat Worley, John Worley, and Gordon had just won the super lightweight PKA title. Again, grace of God, I'm tied in with these people who are the founders of the PKA in sport karate. But Clarence comes in. So they figured out a way, because I kept asking them questions, wanting to do stuff because of my background, that they said we're not part of sport karate. So they told Clarence, you teach Bram, keep Bram out of our hair. And in lots of ways, it was keeping Clarence away from the rest of the students. And Clarence and I bonded. And the whole time he was on leave in Minnesota for control data, working out of the main there, he taught me in school, after school, wherever. And then eventually we all part ways in like 81, 82.
Okay.
I go on to, in 80, I started doing Remy Presas, Modern Arnis, because of Dan Anderson. Dan, if you can hear me, it's your fault. Dan knows it's his fault. Because Dan Anderson, one of the best fighters back then, was talking with Fred King and talking about this guy, Remy Presas, who they had met through Leonard Trigg, who Dan goes, the guy has no fear. So Dan's early level second or something degree black belt, and obviously a great, beyond start of his career being a great sport fighter and one of the best in the history of sport karate. And I paid attention to what he said. So I sought out Remy Presas. We both officially started in 80. And it fit everything. Here's the guy who's going to let me do weapons. I'm going to be a Spanish conquistador, because that's really what Arnis is. There's no Filipino martial arts per se as before the Spanish get there. They all look like Samoan, Pacific, archipelago arts. They wore feathers and shot bows and arrows and had spears. And it's not until the Spanish get there. And that's why a lot of the world, Asian world, hates the Philippines. I know people are going to argue with me, but, they're 99% Spanish Catholic. Their martial arts are actually HEMA, the conquistador fighting arts. There were no structured arts there. They were, for 400 years, basically, vassals of Spain. And their bastardization, you had, Chinese boxing, which becomes Kun Tao, and, the other things added to it because the Chinese are there, is what makes Filipino martial art. And for most people don't get it, that without the Philippines, there's no Sea of China. It's the Pacific Ocean. So people running away from those countries, escaping across the Great Sea, end up in the Philippines. And the Chinese used to deal with it. And the way the world is shaped, because it's not flat. And flat, it looks like you hit Luzon, main island. Because of the curve, actually ever ended up in Cebu, as the Spanish did. But a lot of the Chinese went there. And my wife looks Chinese, even though she's Filipino, and has a lot of Chinese in her. And my Chinese friends go, oh, you married a Chinese person? No, she's Filipino from this village in the Philippines, but she obviously had Chinese background. But all of that, again, fit in place with me because it allowed me I could be a knight. Because to me, I was just being a conquistador, Spanish version of the Three Musketeers, traveling around. It all fit with me. And Remy used to say his family taught Bolo before he invented Modern Arnis. Okay. So in the beginning of his very first book. So most Modern Arnis people, including Dan, when Remy talked about, he said, you cut this, it's cutting. He thought he meant the cutting motion of the stick through the air. As soon as Remy said you cut, I was like, oh my God, we do weapons. And I'm sure you've done martial arts. Haha. Yeah, of course. And most of the time, any kind of weapon art, wherever you are, has nothing to do with the empty hand art. They don't look like each other. The movements aren't the same. And they always tell you, when you learn empty hand arts, we might let you learn a specific tool. And I went, okay. And I was like, that's such a bizarre thing. And I know you could be a page and then a squire, then a knight errant, then a knight. And you learned weapons the whole time, in HEMA. And here's Remy. He goes, oh, what's the first thing to do in FMA? You learn the weapon first. When you get the weapons down, we'll teach you what to do with your empty hand because you never want to be with your empty hand. I'm like, oh my God, this is a gift. You want me to do what? And he eventually told, I kept saying, I want to learn how to cut. And it's sort of like Guru Dan and all the rest of them. We won't show this in public. This is what they do, but it's dangerous stuff and all the people. But I pressed him. That's what I wanted. I love blades. And we, just as an aside, there were no training knives back then. So I decided at one of the seminars overnight, I took one of the short sticks and I cut down the blades to a blade, cleaned it up. I actually went to a hardware store, got some poly and sealed it and showed up to the next class the next morning. Everyone, what's that? I said, a training knife. They all looked at it and went, wasn't that a rattan stick yesterday? I said, yeah, I cut it down, made a handle, made a blade, and it was okay. And then I started actually making wooden knives for Remy. I actually got myself a scroll saw, cut the shape out of a blade, used the grinder and grind lines in it, made actual guards for it, and bonded handles on either side and sold them to the Arnis people. And what's that? And I said, real training knives. And training knives became a thing. And eventually I made poured knives for military units, especially like Team 2. I used to make knives that matched all the production knives out there by handles, exact duplicates. I started making silicone molds and pouring them, of course, made the blades thicker. And I said, we ought to have functional training knives. Of course, nobody actually had folding fighting knives back then. You just had regular, everyday carry pocket knives. Mm-hmm. And I became obsessed. So in some ways, I became an armorer. But Remy, at one point, started teaching me bolo and brought me his grandfather's and uncle's bolos. And he gave me a choice. I could do stick or I could do bolo. And if I did bolo and learned it, he told me it's brutally simple. It's a soul of Arnis, and I can't show anybody while he's alive. And because I started teaching knife and pressed him, over time, I was with Remy for 21 years. There were a few times towards the end, he actually let me teach in seminars. He goes, I was always the man with the knife. And I ran his camps, did the curriculums. He'd come and, he came and lived with me. And I never, just so everyone gets this, never once did he said, oh, you're my next in line. You're going to inherit Modern Arnis. Never came up. Wasn't part of the equation. I didn't care about belt rank. I just loved Remy and his art because it let me use bladed tools. And he sent me, I could show up at a seminar. He goes, I have a friend from the Philippines here. And I paid for my lessons always, I paid for camps. He goes, I need you to go train with this guy. Well, I came to do the instructor camp. Oh, problem, what they tell you. Okay. So go train with these different, that's how I had to meet Shashir. Shashir stayed to be one of my dearest friends. Shashir Inakala, Mr. Ninja Turtle. Yeah. And, he was there because he was brought in by Remy as a Filipino, and Remy became his guide. He started teaching him Modern Arnis. And he had books before he met Remy about Bally Song. So he taught me his version of Bally Song. And over the years, Shashir became my older brother. Come spend time with me. I just spent time with him in the Philippines and in America. And we're still very, very dear friends. He's still, to me, Grandmaster Ninja Turtle. And the guy who did his filming, actually filmed the videos of the movies, I got to meet later because I was just a martial art. I know I'm jumping around a little bit. Mm-hmm. I was in a martial art expo in California. Mike and Sheila were there with Century, and Gary Hessel was there with his wife, and Burton was there. And I was on all friends with Burton, but at that time, Guru Dan's out in public teaching FMA, and he's a big FMA guy, and I'm friends with Burton. But anyway, so I'm at this show, and a guy some of you might know, Marco Huis, was
King of the Streets.
King of the Streets, and I was his knife instructor. We had brought him out to a seminar, the school that I had put together, and the guys who ran the judo program and some of the other, the taekwondo program, the hapkido program, brought him in. While he was there, I was teaching knife on the side. He came over to say, what's that? And he spoke very poor English. He had a translator because he speaks Portuguese. And he said, he can't do that. And I put a training knife in his hand, which he was amazed. And I said, can you jab? And he looked at me like, do bears, do whatever in the woods? I said, yeah. I said, so just hold it here. I started on my hand. He smacked him with time. So I got one of those focus pads, put it on his translator, said, jab him. Starts going and goes, oh, that would do it. So I got a live blade and a target and said, just cut this. He goes, oh my God, if we had this in Brazil, we wouldn't be doing BJJ and this kind of stuff. Oh my God, that's dangerous. Because I said, yeah, exactly. But anyway, so I've been teaching him knife and we had become good friends. So I'm at this big show. Yes, I know I'm going back and forth. The listeners will bear with me. I'm old. I'm allowed to babble. And my booth, when you go in the door, it's immediately to the right. So unless you go in the room and turn around, you don't see my booth. But I'm walking around and I'm spending time with Burton. And they were just releasing Bob, Yes, the dummy from Bob. Century hadn't bought it or anything. But it was from Rev Gear. And it says that Marco Huis is, going to be down to sign autographs and have a meet and greet. So I don't remember the guy's name, but I went up and said, hey, Marco's here. Yes. Where is he? He'll be coming down, sign the list and, get in line. I'm like, no, where's Marco? I said, we just told you. I said, is he up in the room? They're like, look. I said, just call the room. Tell him Bram's here. We're not going to bother him. Go wait. The typical blow off.
Yep.
So I'm like, okay. I said, you're making a mistake. And the important part is I turn around and there's a guy trying to do, because small video equipment, trying to interview people. No one's talking to him. I walk by and he goes, would you like to do a video interview? Go, okay. And I look at him and he wires me up. We start talking and he's filming and he stops and goes, have you been on video before? I'm like, nope, first time. Never done an interview in my life. He goes, oh my God, you're a natural. Starts asking me, starts filming. Goes, oh my God, this is amazing. I said, okay. And he just wouldn't let me alone. And I finally finish up. I thank him. He goes, I don't have a card or anything like that. I just tell him what I'm doing and I walk back to my booth. Big, all sorts of noise. Marco Huis will be coming. He comes and I see his back as he walks away from me. Because like I said, my booth's against that wall. So he walks in. I go, Marco. And he turns around and looks at me and goes, Bram, cuchillo, knife, runs over, hops over the table, almost broke me a little piece. He's hugging me. And the guys from Rev Gear are just staring at us. And he goes, why didn't you call me? Why'd you tell me you're here? And I look right over and I point at the guy from Rev Gear. He wouldn't call the room. He wouldn't let me tell you I was here. And Marco looks at him and goes, what? He walks over with his translator to make sure it was correct. Yells at the guy, and the guy goes, well, how did I know he's really a friend? People say that just to meet you. He goes, all you do is call me upstairs and say, Bram's here. And I would have told you, bring him up. He's my knife instructor. And this guy was so embarrassed. And Marco ended up staying in our booth and occasionally going over to do a little demo on Rev Gear Bob, because that's who he's supposed to represent, and spent the time with me.
Nice.
And it was a great weekend. So the weekend goes, and like a couple years later, one of the women who trains with me, her husband does T-shirts and embroidery on, it's his business besides training with me. And she does marketing and she's really trying to market. And she goes, you need to drive up to Lakeland, Florida. That's where they are. About an hour and a half or so, 2 hours from where I am. So I drive up. She goes, I've arranged this guy to do videos of you. I went, okay. So I went to Grandmaster Remy school. We meet there. I walk in the door. The guy goes, I knew it was you. I knew it was you. And I look over and there's the guy who did the video interview with me. He goes, I've been looking to find you. I knew it was you. I'm like, oh, and that was George Denson. And George Denson did all the videography for the rushes every day for the 2 Ninja Turtle movies. And he was good friends with Shashir.
Nice.
And I went, oh. So he goes, did you ever get your knife made? I said, actually, I just did. Here's my first knife. And so we put tape on the edge, which is really stupid. Mm-hmm. And I filmed the whole thing. And he goes, oh my God, you realize I filmed the whole instructional video with you basically. And there were no breaks. I don't have to edit anything. I went, okay. He goes, you're a natural. And George became one of my dearest friends and did all my videos. And he ended up doing Remy's videos. And one of his last ones that he had done was, you won't believe it, I taught on Remy's floor. And it's me actually doing a whole big knife section and open Remy Presas seminar, of course, with Remy's permission, and Remy put me out there. And George used to do commercial videos for like Xeon and that stuff, the automatic flushers, made lots of money doing, videos, commercials, and martial arts on the side. So he actually became my first national director. He fell in love with my modular system, did videos about me, helped me do my first websites, newsletters. I couldn't have done any of that.
Right.
George was a tech guy, and he was so happy to be able to put it to something, and he fell in love with me and what I do. So George helped promote me, and that's Remy. And Remy would go to North Carolina and see George, and George and I go stay at George's house, and Remy would stay. We'd get him a separate place so we'd have some privacy, and we film and do stuff at George's school. And some of the earliest videos are like Kathy Long, Joe Lewis, and those things were all from George.
Nice.
And from Remy. And he was a stunning videographer. But anyways, that all just helped push me on this path. And a lot of people, Remy has no home school.
Mm-hmm.
Remy was a vagabond. Have sticks, will travel. I used to crack jokes. Bram, what is that from? I said, Paladin. He goes, what? I said, Paladin. So I had to explain who Paladin was. He goes, Bram, you have knives and you travel. And I became like Remy. Time zones don't bother me. People, I'm jet lagged. I have no jet lag. And I'm Vietnam War era. So I was actually 4F. I tried my best at opposite of Alice's restaurant to get in. I wanted to go, I want to kill bad guys. And my buddies all went in, and I tried every branch of the service. I felt like Captain America. Where's the little guy really from? Because I tried all these branches. I kept trying to change stuff. I tried to go. My blood dad had been in what was the first Naval Air Force. I figured they let me in. Did all my armed battery tests, scored really high, and they kept going, you have asthma. I said, well, I do sports, I do martial arts, and nothing mattered. Nowadays, you could get in.
Yeah.
Not back then. But all my guys who went in actually brought me in to teach. They go, oh, you did martial arts long before any of us knew what it was. Come teach my guys. A lot of them, when they came out, became police officers and brought me to their departments. A lot of them stayed in the military and brought me in. And people go, how did you get in to be basically an independent contractor when none of us knew what that was? Well, because my friends all knew I was the crazy guy who did martial arts in the 60s, and they brought me right along with them. I didn't knock on any doors. I didn't try to, like call the DOD or the Pentagon or something weird. I just had friends who brought me along. And I ended up, after doing it mostly, I was, grandfathered in. Yes, I eventually, ended up with different team members and doing different stuff. And yeah, you might know this ditty. Never been there, never done that.
Yep.
No glory, no fame. Nobody's business but our own. And I remember when General I swore me to that, and I swore in, and I swore to defend our Constitution and our Constitutional Republic against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And I tell people I was never a sworn officer in the military because I wasn't allowed to, but I had an advantage. I was the next step down. I was a sworn officer who was not a sworn officer, who was deployed to many places and lent out to different groups to teach. And my advantage was I did ride-arounds. I went on the field with guys. I taught at the different bases wherever and went out to show them how it worked in real. And my advantage was when I was done with my teaching assignment, I could go home. And more, all the stuff I did with Remy came forward because it's a great art for application. Wing Chun is my background, and all of that led to me developing Modular. If I go back to my brain injury, because people go, what do you mean? The greatest thing, people go, would you change anything? I said, no. I was already a certain type of creative, artistic genius before my accident. Again, God-given. Nothing to do with me training or how smart I am. God-given gift. After my accident, my hard drive was cleared. They said I was going to be a vegetable. Then I wasn't a vegetable. Then I said I wouldn't be able to do anything. I couldn't even pick up a can of soup. Wow. I mean, I'd see like 6 cans. I didn't know which was real. It's basically like having a stroke type thing. That my brain injury, I could hear me talking to you, Brian, just like this. But what came out of my mouth was thinking like, that's not what I said. It's very frustrating.
Yeah.
And I taught myself. But what kept me going was I did martial arts all day. And that's how actually I met the guys at Mid-America. I needed a place, someone give me a safe place. My only job was to clean the school and do martial arts all day. And they saw from my training, they went, you obviously knew martial arts before this happened. They were very sweet. And I give them lots of credit. And Clarence Murray tapped on me, and said, oh my God, you have a background. How do you? And I saw things differently. I have no allegiance to anything. Remy was a good structure because Remy would go, I want you to learn, make my art the art within your art, and I need you to innovate and translate. And all I knew is I love this man dearly. I loved his art. He invented Modern Arnis. It was always sort of changing. And he gave me the ability to make it my own, which made me relate it to language. We all learn the same alphabet, 26 letters. We learn words. We learn phrases. Then everything falls apart after that. None of us are the same, especially in spoken language. I don't remember rules of grammar. I've been a journalist for many years and an author. I write as I speak. So if you read my written stuff, people go, sir, I can hear you speaking. My cadence, my timing, the way I use words. And I once had an editor said I need colon cleanse, that people are not as smart as I give them credit for, that I use colons. I said, well, I use colons and semicolons because with a colon, it's a thought that has nothing to do with your first thought, but it makes sense and gives structure to what you're doing. And a semicolon is something that thought actually relates directly. And he goes, can't you just say it out? Law enforcement and military are not that smart. And I said, because I wrote for Police One and Law Enforcement Today. And I started out doing a monthly column editorial. Then I did a weekly. Then I did a bi-weekly. Then I had a daily as events came up. Would I make a response to these things? And I was writing all the time. And my structure of writing is how I speak. Going back to martial arts, the same thing. I ended up coming up with a modular system. And as Remy said, he goes, "Oh, Bram, you supercharged Arnis. You found a better way to teach it." Well, anybody who's trained with Remy, Guru Dan, Angel Kabal, any of the old guys, Bill DeTore, they don't have a system. They don't have a methodology. They teach whatever's in front of them. Changes all the time. And they have so it took Americans, and that's why I wrote the curriculum for the camps. I still have them. Remy'd sit at the house and go, "This is what we're teaching." Some stuff, he goes, "We can't teach that at this camp. I want to save that only for these guys." Okay. "Oh, Bram, what would we call this?" He had no names. Bruce Chu is the perfect example, Grandmaster Bruce Chu. He learned with Remy. He started about 5 years after I did with Remy. And Bruce is so cute. I love him dearly. Former police officer, was a kung fu person before he became our group of Modern Arnis guys. And he gets out there this very day and goes, "I don't know what you guys call it." Makes up all these weird names because he's the Chinese guys brought up in the South. So he loves, chicken, sausage gravy, that kind of stuff. You go, "Aren't you Chinese?" They travel from base to base with his family as he was growing up. But he looks and goes, "I don't know what you call it, but this is how you do it." To this day, his son, my nephew, knows more names from different FMA places and different terminology than Bruce ever will. But Bruce is he's Remy out there teaching the seminar. "Oh, you do this. Now you do this." That's Bruce. Nice. And it's great to watch. And it's funny because everyone's so hung up on names, what you call it. And Bruce just does it. And Chad Bailey, Grandmaster Chad Bailey, we're a little Florida group that's always been together. I think we said this weekend, we're 35 years together. Mm-hmm. And we love following each other. Bruce likes to go last, by the way. So he can see what we did and tie it all together. And Bruce got stuck going first at one big seminar. And he goes, "This isn't fair. I can't do this." And we said, "Bruce, just do it for once. Let us follow you. And we'll tie into what you do." But all of that gave birth to what I call Modular. And because I was always below radar and being brought into these different groups of military groups, I got lent out to other countries. And I was at a Hall of Fame, and I got to meet General Rutninsky from Russia. And he was Putin. Putin was the acting president back then. He was not president of Russia. And my family is originally from Belarus, from Russia. They left during the Russian Revolution. And so I always had this thing about, Russian Cossacks and what went on in Russian. General Rutninsky, he's showing sword and knife, says how much it's part of their culture. So I don't have my own knives yet back then. Mm-hmm. So I take a knife out of my pocket and go, in honor of Russia. And I said, tell him I'm from Russia. I give him a knife. Of course, he's got to find to give me any kind of money, penny, anything, because it's bad luck to give a knife and not give something back. And he goes, "Have you ever been to Russia?" And I said, "No." "Do you still have family there?" I went, "I have no idea." And he goes, "Oh, you should come to Russia." I said, "Oh, thank you. I'll bring you to Russia." Okay. So a couple of years later, I get a phone call. No cell phones back then, folks. I have one of those. I'm so excited that it's, the phone, the remote, you can pick it up. It's got like a little radio type thing. You walk around your house without a cord.
Phone, yep.
Yeah, so I'm like, oh my God. But anyways, goes, "Oh, this Mr. Frank?" "Yes." "This is the Russia House." I'm like, I didn't order any food. And I hang up. Phone calls back, goes, "Mr. Frank?" "Yes." "This is the Russia House." I said, "I already told you." I said, "I didn't know we have a Russian restaurant near us. I didn't order any food." I hang up. Third time. "Do not hang up." "Okay. We are the Russia House." "You said that before." "Well, I don't get it." "We are the embassy." "Oh, okay. Why are you calling me?" "Do you have a gray suit, white shirt, and a red tie?" "What?" "Answer the question. Do you have a gray suit, white shirt, red tie?" No, but I could get one." "Good." And then I hear knock, knock, knock. Goes, "Man at door?" "Man at door." So I walk to the door, and there's a FedEx type guy. Goes, "Man on phone?" Yes. He goes, "You give the man at door your passport." "What?" "Give him your passport." It's so out of context. What does idiot Bram do? I grab my passport. I give the guy. He puts it in this courier diplomatic pouch and goes, "Thank you." Man leaves. He goes, "Man's gone?" I'm thinking, I just gave a stranger my passport. I mean, I'm totally, and he goes, "We will call you back." Click. My phone rings. I pick it up. I think it's going to be Russia. I go, "Russia House?" And it's my most senior student back then and to this day. And my mom adopted him when his German student, when his mom died my mom adopted him and said, "You're my German son," which everyone laughed at. We were a good Jewish family, and that was her German son. But Thomas goes, "Sir, I just had the weirdest thing happen." He goes, "A guy called me. I'm saying he's from the Russia House." I said, "And?" He goes, "Well, then a guy from DHL was at my door, and I was just so before I gave him my passport." I said, "Me too." He goes, "What's going on?" I said, "I don't know." 24 hours later, knock, knock. I was knocking on a table. You guys probably couldn't hear that. And I opened the door, and it's the same guy. And he looks at me and goes, man on phone? I'm like, man, and the phone rings. I pick it up. He goes, man at door? I went, yes. He goes, take package. Hands me a package. Guy at the door leaves. I open it up. It's visas, my tickets, and all my permission papers. He goes, you will use this email. You need to tell and make a list of the weight of everything you bring. And we give you a list of what you're to bring. What is this? He goes, we bring you to Russia. Okay. And I had to make a list of all that, and they'd tell me they want me to come teach knife. I'm like, okay. So I fly to Frankfurt, where I meet Thomas in Germany. We have the same kind of thing. He's got the same package back. And we have to walk through the airport to this really little, and we're at German Airlines, Lufthansa, in a really remote part of the airport. And we go to get on the plane, and, it's like whatever, a modern, regular-sized plane. And the only people on the plane are me and Thomas.
Wow.
Nobody else. And they fly us to St. Petersburg. We land, and we see the terminal, and we taxi right past the terminal. Thomas and I are looking, going, looks like a terminal. We'll be turning around any minute now. And we pull up to this gray, dingy, Cold War, military-style building. They go, you have to get out. And then, they wheel up one of those walkway things, little stairs, because there's no walkway into the terminal. We get down, they grab our bags, and these guys in military garb and guns don't speak English, and they're taking our bags apart. They see all these training weapons and, knives. And they're freaking out, and I don't know how to talk to them. I'm trying to pull out my papers, and in the distance, I see General Rudninsky coming, because he's been at Quantico. He'd been teaching Systema at Quantico when I first met him, and teaching the Marines and other things, the Ross system and Systema. And I see him, and he's wearing DEA sweatshirt and pants, walks right past the guards. These people go to stop him, and he just walks right up to me, gives me a big hug and a kiss, goes, Bram, welcome. I want to welcome you as the first member of your family back to Russia. And gives Thomas a quick hug. And everyone goes, and his guys, it was like Rocky and Bullwinkle. If you guys don't know, Rocky and Bullwinkle is one of my favorite shows. And you always see, Russian, Boris Badenov and Natasha, with the hats and the collars. That's what it looked like. They walk in, and a bunch of the guys, and they open up the forever ID pads that unfold, and they hold them. Everybody freezes. They grab our bags, lock them, take them away. And General's going, come with me. I said, what about her? He goes, come with me. And everyone moves out of the way. Everyone is scared. You can see that. They don't want to deal with. So he takes me out to a car, and he's talking to me and welcoming me and Thomas. And we drive to a Spets complex. And it's a whole hotel complex, so that the wives and significant others can stay in rooms. They have a small Disneyland and shopping malls, while the guys are training these special units of Spets. The families, they are doing whatever, so they're not separated. And I'm going, where are my bags? And we walk in, and there is this, she's no longer his wife, but this woman with to die for. I mean, absolutely gorgeous. Says, Bram Frank, you come with me. Silk shirt opened about to her waist with, lacy brown camisole type things showing, and spray painted pants. And I'm like, oh my God. Takes us up to a room. We get up there. I swear to God, Brian, Thomas and I walk in. Our bags are already in the room. And we're like, oh. So we go downstairs. She tells me anything we want. And I get to meet the boys. And we casual doing some training. There's going to be a big publicity thing at night with, all the hucky-mucky generals and whatever. And we're like, okay. And Thomas and I don't know if we're being used for publicity or what. We're still overwhelmed by all this. And someone said, you meet the general's wife? And I'm thinking, no. And she walks in the room, and everyone freezes, and everyone goes, she comes in and goes, that's the general's wife. And I'm like, rank has its privileges for sure. Oh my God. And they have all these people, all different ranks there. The crowded around is introduced on a little pedestal. In the middle of this crowd, really crowded. And I'm still thinking Cold War. I'm not sure what we're being used for. And I feel something being stuck under my arm. And I realize it's sharp. And I wish I could tell you exactly what, but I don't know. But I stopped the attack. I realized it was a knife and went flying, and I came out with me, and I went back after God, and I went, we are set up. We're going to, do something and use something against the U.S. and EU because, we whatever. And the knife goes flying. I'm bleeding, but I zapped this freaking guy. And I look up, and this giant bear of a guy starts laughing. And I'm like, oh my God, I said, I could have been killed. He goes, well, then I wouldn't let you teach my boys. I mean, these are real Russians. And I look up and he looks up and General Rudnitsky goes, he can teach my guys. He's cool. And Thomas goes, sir, you're bleeding. I said, he goes, that was a test, sort of like in Captain America. Is this a test? Yeah, this was a test. Wow. And we spent 2 weeks teaching the Spets. And they had when they ate, they were like at big picnic tables, endless line with giant stuff. And we were with the officers in this little roped off area with, it had like fake walls around it. They hung up like wall dressing to separate us, like put up a framework and just put some rugs and stuff type things hanging up or drapes. So I'm in there training and these 3 young, gorgeous women walk in and everybody stops and it's basically wolf whistles the old style, does whatever, good Russian boys. And I'm like, oh my God, how can they feel safe to walk around here? He goes, oh, did you meet the general's daughters? And I went, okay. But that was back in 99. Okay. And I had my very first prototype knives. We had 2 trainer drones and 2 live blades. So Thomas and I each had a set. And we were actually going to present them and demonstrate them to the Russian. And we did it at the Ministry of Defense and the different Spets things. And of course, I had my dragon tooths, plastic trainers that I poured with all the grind lines that I told you about that I'd done. And I'm the liaison as Randall Knives say between the martial art world and Randall Knives. I'm a Model 1 collector, and my resin knives are on display in Randall's because that was my primary knife. Randall's the epitome of modern tattoo knife, and that's what I used before I had my own knives. So they were I brought a bunch to Russia, and that's what I still have pictures. So we taught using them, and on display, we tried to show them what my new folders were, the good things that I was doing for Spyderco and kinetic opening and everything that went on. And Thomas and I had a blast. They took me to meet Kalishnikov, and they told me about St. Petersburg, and that because it used to be where the Tsars were from, after the Communist Revolution, Russia let it disintegrate. They didn't want any power, which everything had moved to Moscow. They didn't want anything from St. Petersburg. So Putin is the first one in power to come from St. Petersburg to go back to Moscow. And St. Petersburg, since I was there, has been rebuilt. Anyways, from way back then, 11 of the top knife instructors now in Russia are from my original Spets group.
Oh, wow.
And a lot of them don't talk to each other. They all wanted to be, they all learned, took a piece of what I said and sort of made it their mainstay. And when I got there was a truce. Each time I've gone to Russia, there's one meeting. They promise not to kill each other. We have a big dinner together. Some still can't be in the room with each other, typical daddy loves me best type stuff. But that's how I started being brought back to Russia from that first time. And one of them invited me to Belarus. And I went, done. Belarus used to be used by the communists when it was a big communist government to show how well communism worked. It's like Disneyland. And I say that because everything is clean. The women and the men are to die for. Whether you're straight or whatever, the men all look like, G.I. Joe models. And the women all look like something out of Penthouse Playboy from our generation. I'm like, oh my, and the streets are clean. It's amazing. Because it was a showpiece. It's fake. But anyways, I knew what Russia was. Oh, let me go back to St. Petersburg. The water is contaminated. You can't drink it. So we brought our own sterilization units to purify water. Oh, wow. And we only showered from our neck down. Of course, the shower came out of the wall at about our neck height. We used purified water to wash our hair. And you can't drink the water. And I had all sorts of warnings from CDC and different stuff. And I go to call my wife my first night and tell her I'm there. I tell her about the great trip. I start to say who, and the phone goes dead. Call her back. I start saying I'm with, as soon as I mention anything about the Spets or the general or Putin, the phone goes dead. I go, Thomas, call Andrea. So he calls Andrea, starts to talk to her. As soon as he mentions anything about her doing, the phone goes dead. And we have an old Grandmaster with us who's an FBI instructor. They had brought him along. Comes, knocks on my door, goes, Bram, I can't talk to Greta. This is an old guy who just likes to babble.
Yeah.
So I said, Neil, tell her how wonderful the weather is. Tell her about the hotel room. Conversations going. I said, mention the general. Phone goes dead. Because I don't get it. I said, I do. We're not allowed to talk about what we're doing. He goes, oh. And next morning, Thomas and I are in a room, and a woman comes up and she goes, I need to clean the room. So we actually have a little suite.
Yeah.
And she goes, you have to leave. I said, no, you can lean around this. You have to leave. Next thing I know, the Spets boys and security there, you have to leave. What do you mean I have to leave? I said, what, are you going to change the tapes or something? They all go white. They all freak and go, you need to leave now. Thomas and I look at each other and go, oh, we need to leave now. They went, yes. So we, went downstairs and ate some food and did some training, came back. And the room was clean. Didn't look like it had been moved, but I got the idea. And wherever we went, it turned out it was the opposite of being used for publicity in the bad way. We were the good way, and they had signed the same Rocky Bullwinkle guys with the hats on, collars turned up, watching us wherever we went. I said, are they watching us? I said, no, they're to protect you wherever you go. I said, okay, that's cool. But from that point, anyways, they tell me they're going to bring me to Belarus, which is, like a year and a half or so later. And I want to see my family. And they said, we'll take you to where your family's village, Skydel. So we land, and Thomas and I know what we're going to do. We understand, pardon my language, what a shithole St. Petersburg was.
Yeah.
It was absolutely disgusting. Great people, wonderful people. So we're going to fly in, we're going to teach, and we're going to fly out. I don't know anything about Minsk. We land. I found out about Minsk afterwards and being a showpiece for communism. We pull up to the most modern airport I've ever witnessed. And we get out, and everybody is dressed like they're some kind of GQ, whatever magazine stuff, and whatever it would be for Elle magazine for women. We're looking around, and a guy in a silk shirt looking like Don Johnson from Miami Vice comes up, and it's Alex. And he goes, walks right past security, and he comes in, grabs, goes, come with me. I don't have any bags. I don't have any. He takes me right out, and I'm looking around going, oh my God. We walk past it. Everyone takes it out. And instead of old cars, there's brand new Mercedes and stuff, all these giant Mercedes limos. Goes, come on, we get in. And a guy comes running out, it's, in a uniform, going, their passports, screaming at something in Russian and half English. And, Alex turns and looks at him like total disdain, like, why are you bothering me? He goes, Bram, give me your passport. Thomas, give me your, hands him to him. Goes, looks at the guy, and the guy freezes. They take us to the most modern hotel I've seen up to that point. Thomas and I each have our own room. I'm used to sharing a room with Thomas. I've shared like closets with Thomas. And they take us out to a restaurant, and Alex has a translator, make sure he gets it right. And again, everything was so new and exquisite. It was like a 5-star restaurant. And I'm like, I don't get it. He looks at me and goes, Bram, why did you decide to fly in and fly out? Why aren't you spending time here? Brian, I don't know what to say. I don't want to look at him and go, because St. Petersburg was so disgusting, as much as they looked trained, I wasn't going to spend extra time there. Are you kidding me? I didn't expect this. He looks at me and goes, you thought this was his words, you thought this was a shithole like St. Petersburg. And I went, actually, yes. And he starts laughing and goes, don't worry. Next time I bring you in, you'll spend some extra time. But they took me to see my grandma's village, Skydel. They took me around. They treated me royally. And it turns out he was the president's head of security for Belarus. And we taught all the teams there. And we had a great time. And that just opened the door for more. And that's years ago. And he went on, he went to Form Alpha. I'm saying the wrong thing. That's okay. And it's the same as our SEAL Team 6. And it wasn't until many years later in Moscow that when I was teaching with some of my guys that, again, grabbed me, put a hood over my head, shoved me into a car, and drove me through different security stuff with my guys from my Crimean teams, who I teach all the time, and bring me in. And I realize I'm in a deep complex and take me down. And Dimmy's going, you'll really like this. And I see these guys teaching, and I look up, and they're not doing sustainment. They look like they're doing old Bram stuff, knife stuff. And I'm looking and going, I think that's my stuff. And a guy comes in the far door. Everybody freezes, salutes to him. He looks at me. He goes, everyone, bow. Points at me and goes, this is my instructor. This is Bram. He goes, he changed my life. It's why we don't do Systema anymore or Ross. We do Bram Ross. And I went, oh my God, Alex. And I was in the Ministry of Defense, and these elite teams were doing, that's Dana Ferranda's over there too now, and from the Philippines. And it was very cool because I didn't expect the kindness. In fact, goes, we do your stuff. And I don't want to insult them in any way. I was watching some of the stuff and sort of rolling my eyes. Dimmy goes, Bram has a new way to do off number 4, for example. I'm going, Dimmy, don't say that. And instead of being, he goes, oh my God, you got to show us. Go get the camera crew so we can film it. You'll do it with me. I'm like, well, I don't want to say you're doing it wrong. He goes, oh, well, it's been a bunch of years. You have a new way. I went, well, it evolved a little. This is it. So it was really, and then it took me around all over Moscow, to meet his friends, to eat. And, in America, we're saying, oh, we have all these sanctions. Everything I saw was open coffee shops and beautiful people and wonderful restaurants. I'm like, this is true political Cold War stuff. And some of that, again, it's like going to Israel. My family's been in Israel since 1918. So when I went to Israel to teach and when I hooked up with Dennis, people go, how'd you get in to do all this? Well, I have sort of reputation. I taught the commandments of steel there for 15 years. And of that, most of the time with Dennis Hanover, the true father and soul of Israeli martial art. He's one of the first 5 people with Imi Lichtenfeld. And Dennis was originally under Masoyama and the Jiu-Jitsu Federation of Europe. And he speaks beautiful South African Oxford English. And he's taught himself Hebrew. Stunning man, been involved 6 wars. And he does Hissar it. And everyone thinks Krav is it. Well, everybody does Krav. Everybody's been in the military, got to do Krav. Mm-hmm. But Hissar it, survival, Krav is contact fighting. Hissar it is survival fighting, and it's Dennis survival jiu-jitsu. And they are stunning warriors. And I've been adopted by Dennis's family and have for many years. And I have the privilege of being the only one ever allowed to teach on Dennis's floor. And after the first couple of commandments of steel, I always taught at Dennis's. He closed the school, and he would tell me there are units, commanders are coming to see you. I cannot point them out, but if they want you, they will come get you after class. And I was there to teach my open commandments of steel and take my students from all over the world to see Israel, see Jerusalem. And at times I'd leave it where my other instructors would have to teach for a bit because I had to go away for a bit. It was really cool, and it was good for my ego. And one time I brought my wife there. We land in when Ben Gurion Airport was the old style. They got to wheel those things up you don't go to the terminal. So they bring me on a bus. I come out. There's a bunch of guys waiting. Like, Mr. Frank, how are you? And I sort of recognize them. And one of them, Avi, goes, "Sir, do you remember?" I said, "Of course I do. You're from Dennis." He goes, "Come with me." And they go, "Ma'am, you must be Mary. You must be Mrs. Frank. Come with us." We avoid all the crowds. They take us into an office. They get her some diet. She go diet. She always drank Diet Coke. So they got her Diet Coke. They gave her food. We sat there. They took our passports. We sat there and talked. Go, everything's all set. We'll see you at class tonight. Do you want us to take us to the hotel? I said, well, what about all the guys that came with me? I had like 60 guys who'd come with me. Men and women come in the train. He goes, they probably haven't made it through security yet. I'm like, okay. I go, we'll take your bags to the hotel and you can drive with them. If not, when you get outside, we'll have a guy looking for you. If you need to, we'll drive you. So I go back through. They're just barely clearing passport control. He goes, "Sir, where did you disappear to?" A couple of my guys went, "Oh my God, they came in." I said, "Yeah, the M group came and got me." Mary goes, "They were so polite. We've had cold, these people, there's nowhere, they're dying of the heat. They're not allowed any drinks in line." And Mary's talking about, we're sitting in an air conditioned room and she's having Coke and snacks. They're just looking at her. And they get their bags. And, "Sir, are we taking you to a hotel?" I said, "Actually, no." And they came and got me and Mary and said, "Your bag's at the hotel," and took us to the hotel. And then I saw Dennis. And that, rank sometimes has its privileges. One of the few times as time went on that I went, I'm actually appreciated for what I do. And I remember when I was designing I had to redo the Marine Corps bayonet. You'll never see my name on it, but it was a total failure for Ontario, who's now bankrupt, by the way. Mm-hmm. Karma is a bitch. They came to me, and I really wanted my Abanico was going to what I thought would be a better knife than a K-bar. A K-bar is a knife designed by committee. And Ontario actually did all the stuff, and their parent company is Surftronics. I think I can say that. Surftronics, you've seen Terminator and Cyberdyne? Oh, yeah. Well, they're Cyberdyne for real. When I went there, I go through all the secrecy stuff and put on clean suits as they walked me around. Sign all these secrecy agreements. In the orientation room, just like all those big screens when they show you people at Cyberdyne, all the cool weapons that's playing in the background. I mean, I really felt like I was at Cyberdyne. And then they told me that they're going to lose the contract in the bayonet. And people go, the Marine Corps bayonet, looks just like your Abanico. I know. And I can't discuss the legal things that came after that because it didn't go well. But I was willing to do it because the carrot dangled in front of me was your Abanico will be replaced to K-bar. And if people don't know what K-bar, there was no company K-bar. It was sorted out to Camillus, to Ontario, and then a separate company that became K-bar, only making K-bars, and they can't make enough of them for the U.S. military. And if the listeners don't know, I'm actually a knife designer and hold knife patents on knife design. Mm-hmm. I love designing knives. That's part of my martial art part. I make tools with attributes that fit my trainings, my methodology. But anyway, so I'm doing that. So I did the Marine Corps bayonet, and it became the art. And if you look at it, it actually has indexing on it because I own the patent. I'm sure you've indexed the knife when they always talk about you find a point so you can pivot a knife. Mm-hmm. Well, there's no point on it, no single. So I designed an indexing point, be it a hole cut through it, ball bearings put there, or my new post in a hole. And I went to patent it. Someone said, you can't patent it. Well, the idea of grab an indexing point where there's no actual point means nothing to the patent office. So I actually made indexing. My first official patent was with Mike Gunting with Spyderco because I made an actual indexing point. And then technically have the trademark on the term indexing. And it even made fingdexing so that your finger's indexed. I made a clip because Spyderco had the world's first clip. I made the world's first flat clip with a function, a spoon clip. Little side story, guys will appreciate it for the martial art part. They told me to design a special clip. So I'm sitting at the table. All the Spyderco and brass are at one table with, the big famous custom knife makers all hobnobbing. And I'm at a table by myself with my wife. I don't care. I don't really know all these people. And I'm nervous. So what am I doing? I take the knives off the table and I'm twirling them and spinning them because, it's a fidget spinner back then.
Yeah.
My wife goes, take the knives off the table. The waitress takes the knives off the table. I'm still trying to think. I got to design a clip. So I start twirling the forks and spinning the forks. My wife calls the wait, take the forks off the table. Waitress goes, okay. Now I only got spoons on the table. I need to think. I pick up a spoon. I'm spinning the handle. I put my hand into the spoon part and it doesn't do what I want. My wife, I said, stop. I called the waitress over. She goes, I know, take the spoons. I said, no. How many different kinds of spoons that go on the table for actual use, not kitchen spoons, do you have? She goes, I don't know, 6. I went, bring them to me. She goes, you want me to bring spoons? I went, yes. My wife looked right at me and said, you have an idea. I said, yes, I do. Brian, every spoon I picked up pulled me to a different place in the depth of the spoon. I could not pick where I wanted to be. The shape of the spoon pulled me there. And I went, oh, I can picture a spoon bonded to the backside of a knife. That it would pull you there opposite the indexing. So it would pull you and right down. You couldn't miss going to indexing. You were in a slot. And that also meant, most clips have those curls and bends and you catch them and you unspring your clip.
Yeah.
Well, by making a spoon, the spoon is indented. The deep part of the spoon actually touches underneath onto the scale and the clip is flat. And I can make it really thick and heavy so it won't get sproinged. Now, this also goes back to, again, as parts of my life, I'm sitting in one of those old-fashioned urinals, that come up to like your chest, and you got the mirror over it, and I see a guy coming in from the back. This is long before I've got a regular EDC knife in my pocket.
Mm-hmm.
I thought I was tough carrying a knife. And I've had a knife since I've been 4 years old, by the way. My grandfather gave my first one, keep it sharp, keep it oiled, keep it clean. You give it to your grandkids.
Nice.
I've always used knives. But anyways, I see the guy coming at me. And now, Brian, question to you. Would you ever, in a public restroom, slide on a public restroom floor that's wet and gooey?
If I had to, yes.
Right. Well, my thing was, of course I wouldn't. You couldn't pay me enough to put my face in that. I turned around and I tried to zip up. Nowadays, I'm smart to know you don't zip up first. You just turn around. But as I went, the knife came out of my pocket with one of those little springy clips, and it's sliding across the slimy floor. And he and I were sliding on the floor to see who would get to the knife first. Obviously, we know who got to the knife first.
Mm-hmm.
And I swore I would design a better clip, which rolls me all the way to why I was really spending so much time thinking about a special clip. My Gunting was the first flat clip, and it's patented, the first clip with a function in it, a flat clip with a spoon function. And specifically, it's actually a utility patent, a function patent, not a design patent, that allows you to pull down to that spot and that it holds it safely and that it pulls you to a spot, which then goes with my other part of the patent claim of indexing, so that you can go from forward to reverse grip without taking your hand off the tool.
That's
Everything
cool.
I teach in my methodology, because I don't have a system, I don't have a style, I have a train the trainer methodology.
Mm-hmm.
Because unlike most people, when Remy said I supercharged Arnis, I have to find a way to teach everything I do simply in Wing Chun. Back to Wing Chun. Wing Chun only has 3 forms, plus long pole and barchamdo, the blade. And I ended up with, I have 3 basic patterns based on human anatomy and how we move. Because you can cover the high line, you can cover the low line and protect your head. And they're gross instinctive survival skills. If you can't do that, human beings are dead. There's no thinking when we do that. So I ended up, because of FMA and HEMA, I realized that protect the high line is the number 1 strike. Protect the low line is number 4. And, protect your head is 12 down, upward and downward vertical. And in that whole process, I realized that the beginning of Silnam Tao, mixing and matching different Wing Chun versions, I realized was Hun Sao, hand circle. Because I do animate, I don't do music. You know, Guru Dan and other people talk about beats and music. I don't know anything about music. I suck the piano, I suck the clarinet, but I do animation. I'm an artist. And I saw that a Wu Sao, an open palm, coming to your shoulder, not down your center line because your elbow has to move, and that's wrong. But it just folds to your shoulder. And then you Pak Sao. Well, then you drop Fuk Sao. Well, that's a horizontal Fuk Sao, and it works. And as you move, you let your fingers drop to a vertical Fuk Sao. So the hole of punching is parallel to your body, not perpendicular where they can get in with you. And then you pick your hand up again. And I started looking at my fingertips, comes from being an old hippie stoner type thing, and watching trails. I went, oh my God, animation. There were the key drawings, you know, hand up, hand to push, Fuk Sao, hand to the side, and then fingers down. I went, oh my God, it makes a circle. Well, by the time I was doing FMA, I realized, oh, that's high-low-high of Sinawali. And when I started putting it together with Remy, because he watched me when I first met him doing stuff, he went, oh, you already do Arnis. I said, no, it's Wing Chun. He goes, no problem, that is Arnis. Because in the story that's famous when I was doing the seminar, I'm in the back of the room being respectful, and Remy comes right through everyone, parts like Moses in the Red Sea, and comes up to me and says, no problem. You know, well, they didn't know my name. Goes, look at me, goes, my name is Remy. What's your name? Not Professor Presas. I said, my name is Remy. I said, Bram. He goes, oh, Bram, I am Remy. I will be your friend for life. You will be my friend for life. You already know Arnis. I said, no, that's Wing Chun. He goes, no, that is Arnis. Come with me. And he used me for the whole day as Zuki and beat me up. And a part of that, yeah, I'm old-fashioned. So I'm not saying a word, no matter how much he hurts me. He goes, pulls me aside. He goes, Bram, does this not hurt? I said, yes. Well, you should tap out. I didn't know what a tap out was. So the next time he starts to grab me, I start to tap out. He goes, no, that doesn't hurt. He goes, this hurts. And he put a world of hurt. I started screaming. He goes, now you tap out. So I learned, and he told me tap out was, he was never going to stop the pressure. He just wouldn't go any further. And I went, okay. You know, I was with him for 21 years after that.
Nice.
But I learned. Yeah. But like I said, I brought knives to him, and everything I did geared me to that point. But my methodology, I said, eventually Remy came and said, oh, you supercharged Arnis. Dan teaches it, you know, Modern Arnis 80, you know, fast track Arnis. Within that is based on my modular system. And my modular system is, you know, human beings have a fixed point, shoulder to hand. We have to make an arc, and the arc is a downward diagonal across our bodies. That's how we're built. You can pretend anything else, but we go from high to low. Our palm is down. We recover like we're coming back to a curl. So we're palm up, and we pick our hand up. And then we have to turn like extending your hand over your head. Well, that's your vertical. And I turned all the motions of basic survival instinct, gross motor skill, into the same thing as your offensive skills. So because my guys are for real, so that when you have tunnel vision, you cannot, I had someone say you can inoculate yourself against tunnel vision. No, you can't. Once you're at X number of beats per minute, everybody, we have adrenaline dump, you get tunnel vision. That all of a sudden they made knights in armor make more sense to me because they had these little slits. They can protect their whole head because they already knew they were going to get tunnel vision. You can't see to the side.
Right.
When people say you need, there is no peripheral vision. All of that's a myth. That's a sport myth. In real, they tell you don't look at the weapon. Well, in real, guess what knights and those guys had to look at? You look. The only thing that's going to kill you is the weapon.
Right.
You have this little slot. Guess what? We watch the hand. That's what my guys do. We body shift and watch. I don't care about anything else. You hit me or kick me with something, I don't care. If you're looking straight out, can you see your feet?
Of course not.
Of course not. We're predators. Our eyes in the front of our head, and our cheekbones are in the way. We have to drop our head, which is how we also do DUIs.
Yeah.
You know, you tell a drunk person walk this white line, they turn their head down and look at the line, and of course, the head's out of balance. They fall over.
Yeah.
Human beings look where we're going to be, not where we're at, which is why I failed at gymnastics. I didn't realize I got to look where I'm going. My feet know where I'm at. You can run a parallel beam that way. As soon as you look at your feet, which is why they say don't look down on a narrow bridge. Why? You fall over. Yep. You know, we run and we envision where we're going to put our feet, which is how you get your footprints one in front of the other like a cartoon, because we run that way. We use our brain. If you get hit in the head, everyone closes their eyes and tries to envision what their head looks like and where you got hit. We use our brain as a remote sensor type thing. But anyways, when I put the system together, which goes back to when I said I have minimal time, you know, I had a couple colonels go, how many years do you want from me? I said, I don't. How many weeks do you need? I don't. I go, can you give me one training day? You know, a training day to a military guy, that's a whole day gone.
Yeah.
and they teach you a subset of skills in that time. So I came with some and go, look, if you can give me an 8-hour federal day, 6 hours of training, you end up with 2 hours of mandatory breaks within it. But I teach 3 hours and 3 hours because human beings actually can't absorb more than 6 hours of physical training, actual learning stuff in a day.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to go at the end of the day, if they can't do it, don't pay me. And the guys would feed it back and all the commanders go, you can come back. But them giving me one, I train them for a day and then they're going to deploy them. And I made modular work.
Nice.
I only have 3 patterns plus a 4th. And, my patterns become 2-side pyramids in there. I invented a backside Sinawali, a closed side. Everyone does open side. So I made a backside. And then I went, did you know that over your arms and under your arms are different functions? Everyone goes, that's why I said high to low. You have to teach people to be over their arms. We're not designed for it. We're not designed for straight line action. We can't. We have the elbow is a single 90-degree bend, and you have a semicircular wrist joint, and we're hinged on the side in a ball and socket on our body, and we're made to go out towards our focal point, and our arm comes back to us. We make sort of a triangular motion. My arms aren't long enough to read the box. We don't meet, and people punch out to their sides from the shoulder, but we actually punch the center. Our arms are designed to come to center, like you're praying or doing, what Tony Blauer called the spear.
Right.
That's how we're designed anatomically. So my methodology is based on basic anatomics because gross survival skill and offensive skill use the exact same motions. When you get tunnel vision, it doesn't matter. When you get tachypsychia, time distortion, you can't tell, and you drop down to gross motor skills, because humans have 3-speed brains and 2-speed bodies. We have fine thought. We can train people in a sport thing that have this complex thought, not a real zone that we can work in. And then you drop to gross motor thought. Well, your body, it's his joke. He's a prankster. That we have 2-speed bodies. We got fine motor skill and gross motor skill. End the story. There's no complex. And you get to a point, your body shuts down, you lose all fine motor skill. So even my tools are designed to be held in a gross motor skill function. They're firearms ergonomics, but they work on, so you don't have to, do you teach fine motor? No, I don't teach anything. Go, why do you do that? So stupid. Well, my people and most of us end up in a gross motor skill situation under duress. So I teach you from that point.
Nice.
If you can do more fancy stuff, more power to you. I teach gross motor skill. Why? Because when bombs are going off and bullets coming at you and people are screaming and there's all sorts of stuff going on and you have tachypsychia, so you have time distortion. It's like a 50 caliber. It's not going, it's going bang, bang. Bad guys look like they're taking half-beat, slow-motion steps. You want to pee on your leg. You can't remember your name. Your heart's pounding out. You can't see your friends, which is why we stack and use hands because it's some friendly fire. You can't see who are to either side of you. I teach you from that point.
Okay.
My skills are based on that. So instead of all this fancy stuff, and martial arts have 3 levels. You have the artsy-fartsy part, which is stunning. I love it. And it could be from simple to complex, but there's the art. There's the sport version. I don't care what level of sport it is. And then there's combatives and different levels within it. They all have a similarity. They do not exist in each other's venues.
Right.
And not that I can't make a sport work in real combative. I can do it. I can take traditional art of any kind, whatever level they want to call it. And yes, I can make it work in self-defense and combative if I had to. It does not work back down the chain. You can work up the chain.
Right.
But down the chain, I cannot take combatives and make it work in sport. And I cannot make it work in traditional because the safety factor is gone.
Yeah.
And it has only one. People, what? I said, it's like the top of the world is blade, then firearm, then impact. So you have edge tool, projectile tool, impact tool, and God help you is mostly empty hand. And as Sykes and Fairburn and Applegate used to all mouth, the last place a soldier wants to be is with his empty hands. And FMA understands that.
Yeah.
Guess what? They're coming to attack us. Teaching you empty hand for 50 years will not help you live. But if I teach you weapons work, which is actually very simple, the bad guy comes, we can at least survive. Again, back to the FMA thing of I'll teach you empty hand later. Knights in armor, I'll teach you empty hand later. Samurai, I'll teach you empty. Why? Because the most important thing is we're tool users. We're human beings.
That makes sense.
And tools, think of all the tools that are out there. Do you know how old a knife is? the concept, the principle of a knife, not the concept, the principle of a knife, an edge that cuts flesh. Because you're still in my age group technically. I was taught geometric shapes in school. So I learned about inclined planes and globes and everything. And if you put two inclined planes together, I have a wedge, and a wedge is a matter separator. It separates things. So before, people used to go, knives go with Clovis people 60,000 years. And, they talk about when knives quit being obsidian to, the concept, they come, brass, copper, iron, steel, whatever. And I go, that's not the real part. So as time has gone back, right now, 3.9 million years old. That's how old knives are. So humanoids, not humans, humanoids made knives. They weren't cutting fabric. They weren't cutting rope. They didn't cut wood. This thing, humanoids figured out how to make knives, nap knives, to cut flesh. How do we know? Because we find the knives and the bones with the cut marks on them.
Yeah.
And they've slowly been pushing it back. I go, you can't find the principle of anything else that's that old. It's humanoids. It's mankind's best friend. Without knives, there's no civilization. Knives affected everything we do. They were invented to cut flesh. Mm-hmm. We had them as humanoids. We've maintained it. And an obsidian/rock knife of any kind is actually sharper than steel. And the principle, an edge that cuts flesh, has never changed. Which goes back to, you might have known from reading, I have the commandments of steel.
Yeah.
I love Charlton Heston and Moses, one of my most powerful. And I always wanted to have, so I actually have commandments of steel. I have 2 tablets. I did it up in Israel. It was a perfect place where I taught in Israel all the time. Mm-hmm. Sort of Moses like coming down off Mount Sinai. And commandment number 1 is steel cuts flesh. Always. It has for 3.9 million years.
Yeah.
Okay. Rule number 2, you can't change rule number 1. Commandment number 3, unless you have on a blue suit with a big red S, rules 1 and 2 always apply.
Nice.
And rule number 4, the principle of a knife, an edge that cuts flesh, has existed for millions of years. It's a constant. So what is the first production tool ever made? It's a knife. Mm-hmm. I learned how to split a big rock into a mother knife, and I teach people how to make small hand axes and knives off of that and to nap them. And I teach people, guys in the tribe and village, how to do it. It was the first tool that we learned to produce and teach others. Wow. And some got better than others. And different types of napping define history. And to this day, glass, obsidian, ceramics are sharper than any steel, because steel is actually very rough edges. The shape of knives, the concept, well, that's affected by what my culture is, because there's lots of cool designs that did not last. They looked neat. They were done to fit some ethnic background or whatever. And except for that group in whatever country, the designs don't last. And if you look at it, to jump ahead a little bit, an 1860 cavalry sword, when they finally got that established, is basically no different in number of degrees and shape as a katana. They're 2 of the world's best cutting tools. There's nothing like a saber, and there's nothing like a katana. One is a single-handed version. The other can be a 2-handed version. But overall, the idea, the overall shape, and the way it cuts. And, swords went from straight to curved because human beings work in a curve. And too many people were being dragged off their feet or dragged off their horses with a straight line because there's no tangential part. You're trying to push a blade through an object. With a curve, you're always hitting a tangential point, and it's sliding. We cannot cut in a straight line. We cut in an arc. So a curved blade not only went on horseback around the horse's head and around us easier, but it disengaged when we caught the enemy. It automatically disengaged itself. Where a straight blade got caught and people lost their sword, got pulled off their horses, curved blades. And so on my knives, it's the same I tend to induce curves in my methodology. And my knives, people go, there's something wrong with your blade. It doesn't look right. All my blades are offset. So that little bit of straight on my big fixed blades is offset at an angle to mimic an artificial curve, because it is a distal taper and it's offset. It's not 90 degree to the handle. It's offset a few degrees so that the tip is off center, so that it causes an artificial curve, because I understand the B impact.
Right.
And I think that's different from me than most martial artists. Is I invent knives, design knives, and then I engineer and make knives. And my knives get used for real stuff. I make hard use knives. but I also on the side make knives for our good guys against bad guys, but I make edge tools. What my system has become, Brian, is based off knives. Because when Remy brought me to bolos, bolos exist before machetes. Machetes are a de-evolution of bolos. And a machete, which is a very inexpensive, is all around the world. It's the number one terror tool in the world. Everybody's got machetes in every country. So learning a halberd, learning a broadsword, learning an épée, a saber, katana, whatever, is all fake because it doesn't exist in the real world. But everybody's got machetes.
Right.
So learning bolo, which is just a big knife, not a small sword, I found has applications through all the military, all the police, all the anti-gang, the anti-cartel, and it's used just on the streets. Everybody's got a machete. We can carry them everywhere. Okay. The reason I went to pocket knives is most of the time around the world, except for recent times where we're trying to ban them, everybody carries a pocket knife. So I made tactical, proper pocket knives because we can carry them. And my tools, I think you've seen them, have that big Bramp that I patented. They come up and they press like a firearm, but they're ball-peen hammers. I don't cut you. I can hammer. I make the world's only full-force continuum tools. And I can go up the force continuum or in the flow because of the way I've designed it. It's just like a firearm when it's out of battery. It's still in a user position. I can actually shut it back down and go from lethal to non-lethal all within the flow. So I go non-lethal, semi-lethal, which is what I call Waka Waka Pac-Man. If I didn't have a Bramp, it wouldn't work. Then I can snap cut people. I can get it open, and when it's open in a lethal mode, I actually teach non-lethal use of it, all the way to lethal. And then if you comply, well, right in the flow, I can shut it back down again. And I tell people, they go, what's so important about that? I said, we learned that in martial arts, judicious use of force. Mice were right. We're supposed to be able to escalate our martial arts, and if something they start to comply, we achieve our goals, we de-escalate. That's part of martial arts, being able to go up and down the force continuum, and you use the amount of force that you need, judicious use of force.
Right.
That's what we used to teach all our law enforcement before we got so wokey.
And like I said, I'm going to put links for your website and everything when the episode comes out, and send people to where your training is and where they can pick up your knives. And so you definitely get all that out there for people to check out.
Yeah, I appreciate, and and for me, I'm a true, like I said, I'm an old-fashioned Leonardo da Vinci in my own way. Mm-hmm. I'm a Renaissance inventor because I also, I design and build race cars. I do firearms. I do hydroponic systems. I do regular gardening. I do handicap systems for people because my dads both dads got handicapped. And I built handicap systems for them for travel, for shower, for whatever. I do a little bit of everything.
Okay. Cool.
And that's the problem with being a good brand. But that's why my knives are so different, because I think out of the box, but they're all based on, as you said, it's part of who Bram's martial art is.
Yeah.
And you have Gracie on your show and you've had Dan on your show. So Dan is actually, and I'm honored, Dan always pats me and goes, you're a genius and I love you. And I love Dan dearly. He's one of my best friends in the world. And he teaches, he's an instructor. He does my bolo and my knife. And he did a whole book and series, Steel Meets Flesh, because, it's got a little bit of the Graciela. Gracie is my little sister. Gracie is an instructor. And they both just at my 70th birthday bash where I became Lord Bram from Prince Michael at Sealand. I'm the only honorary martial artist for Sealand. You can buy stuff from them, but I'm adopted into the royal family and mentioned on the stuff now. And because I'm Lord Bram, was what me decide now I can make the Knights of the Guardian of Legacy, because the Philippines named me the Guardian of Legacy of Bolo. So I'm making my own round table starting my 71st birthday, teaching Bolo, because Bolo has real application. But I'm making the Guardians of the Knights of Bolo.
That's cool.
And my modular, we all use my knives, they're all the choice, because I also believe less than lethal cutting by a mechanical shutdown, which I did for Paladin Press. They sought me out years ago in the early 90s. And Mike Janich and Paladin Press came and said, we want to learn about biomechanical cutdown. And I took them to meet the guys at Randall. We actually filmed at Randall, only film that's ever done at Randall, because I believe we're biomechanical pulley systems. You cut the cables, we don't work. You destroy the pulleys, the cables can't pull fluid, don't work. And the very last thing is sanguination, which everyone thinks is so cool. Bleeding out doesn't work. And I was a paramedic and a medic for many years and worked in the ERs. And people don't bleed as easily as they think. You can pick some, but we're self-sealing. That's what shock is. Trying to make someone bleed out is not a good way. Stabbing and thrusting is a way to hide the real use of a knife, which is an edge that cuts flesh. of cutting. You cut someone's cables, it's over. If you cut the flexors, it's toast. I turn fingers into fingies. I put RNS on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
And the stuff that I do is designed to get around body armor. Bad guys, when I first had to deal with bad guys in the Middle East, they were wearing old Russian body armor, and they brought me in because things they've been taught about stabbing the body, don't work. The guys had armor on. I'm one of those, everyone talks about defanging the steak. I said, what does that mean? They don't know what basic anatomical, you don't need to be super anatomy, which is why I teach about flexors and extensors and carpals and, where are you going and what can you do? And it's like, how do I get around your vest? You ever wore a vest? A bulletproof vest, tack vest. Well, you have to have big scoop outs for your arm. Otherwise, our arms don't work. And people go, you stab through the ribs. I said, you've obviously never tried to stab through a rib. Ribs are designed for a purpose. And that's why, military knives had to be at least 8 inches. Kind of get 8 inches penetration to get to your heart or your lungs. And it's wasted. I stick if I want to teach the guys, right up the arm. And they throw a stick it inside. Just cut the pectoral muscle. Your arm rolls out of socket. If I want to turn you into a gimp, well, let me digress. How many weapons does a person have? And I hear all this. I said, we have 3. What do you mean? Well, I have 2 independent arms. I cut one arm, the other works independently. I have 1 interdependent, a leg. If I take away 1 leg, I'm a stork. What? Well, if I take away 1 leg, I need that 1 leg that exists to stand. I can't kick with it. That's why, again, Monty Python and Holy Grail and the Black Knight is my whole system. My guys joke about it. I teach Black Knight Tactical. Because I turn you into a stump. We'll call it a tie. And I look at people and go, if I shut down your arms, and it works great when we've had to deal with terrorists, if you cannot pull a detonator, can't pull a trigger, can't hold the tool, can't grab me, I win.
Right.
And, Shatoris is the longest muscle in the body. And I grew up with those old-fashioned shades with my grandparents. You pull them down, they go, whap, and pull up.
Yep.
I'd always unspring them. My grandfather would get mad. You have to take them out, respring them, and scream at me. Don't do that. But that's what happens when you cut a sartorius. It runs from your hip to the inside of your knee. It's the longest muscle in your body and initiates the first pickup of your quad. Without it, you can't move your leg. And it holds your leg in your hip socket. When you cut it, you roll out of socket. You can't pivot. Your foot's always turning to the outside and trying to pivot all the way out to your butt. And it's an easy turn. If you've got a drop holster, I know exactly where to go.
Yeah.
And same thing with hands. I did this whole biomechanical shutdown thing. And because Monty Python and Holy Grail had just come out, and I was friends with Terry Gilliam and Greg Miller, who I did animation with them, that if you find the leading edge from Paladin Press, the copies are out there. How in the Monty Python, they scroll, no mooses were hurt, no and all the bizarre stuff. And we did that kind of script on the leading edge because I was constantly cutting up chickens whenever. I kept going, no live chickens were hurt. Well, maybe some were. Well, we had to kill them to get them in this situation so we could. We really joked around when we filmed at Randall and then did the editing. But I believe in Black Knight Tactical. And less than lethal shuts someone down. And that works also if you defend yourself and have to go before a jury. You want a jury to go, why didn't you do more? Well, I don't have to,
Right.
Because if you do more, then they go, why did you do all that bizarre stuff? On this, did you know legally if I give you a paper cut or cut your finger off, cutting your finger is cutting your finger.
Yeah.
So many people are missing digits. It's not a big deal. That's all you did? You cut their finger? Well, yes. Or, if I use my brand, I crushed your finger, who cares? So I teach stuff that a jury or review board you can get away with. I want to limit liability of officers and all of us. And I want stuff that we don't do Dungeons and Dragons crap and end up going to jail with the very people we're defending. So my system is based on what can I teach these guys who are in full armor, out in combat, and what can they do? And I teach in parts of the zones where my guys go where they actually carry bolos with me that I've designed for them or my big blades because the cultures we fight against, like I said, be it the cartels or the Middle East or Southeast, they all have machetes. They all have some. So I teach arts that are still applicable in my own way. And that's how I honor Remy, which is why I've dropped most of what I teach in modern times.
Yeah.
And I specify, and you guys have seen, I teach bolo and I teach contact bolo and I teach contact cutting. And you may know Aaron Cohen.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. So Aaron's an old friend from being with Dennis in Israel. We just reconnected and talking about stuff. He said, he loves my knives. And we joke because the old crazy shooting stuff, I used to teach way back decades ago, gun kata, and Florian Lahner was one of my main guys in Europe who competed against Gabe Suarez. And people went, "You guys are so crazy. Oh, look at what you do." And, in the movie had come out, The Gun Kata, with Christian Bale. Why am I drawing a blank? I always want to say, it's all right, it'll come to me later. Pardon me, I'm 71. It's
fine.
I've been up for a bunch of these. But anyways, people said, "You guys are crazy," because we did single-handed, different reverse. And Aaron goes, "Bram, you know what this is?" I said, "Yeah, modern versions of some of the stuff that I tried to teach in Israel." People thought I was nuts. And my cutting, more and more people go, "We didn't get." I just taught that Rocky Mountain Thunder in Colorado. And people who've seen me for years went, "That's what a Bramp is really." What's the yellow house in the corner you've seen for 20 years? Mm-hmm. So they paid attention, but people, as you know, don't listen. Not in class, not when you do. So they finally went, "That's what you're really doing?" Because I never got the knife open. I taught use of my folders, held in your hand like a ball peen hammer, how to grab, how to rake, how to do. And they went, "That's amazing." Well, that's because they missed it. But all of that goes with my overall philosophy. I teach less for people to learn more. And my methodology, again, which is why I brought up Wing Chun originally, is based very much on Wing Chun. And I really have to thank my first instructor, Steve Chen Lee, and of course, Grandmaster William Chung, who affected me greatly. Because he came to America to teach Wing Chun knife, and the world got mad at him. He taught like week-long seminars for like 2 months, and everyone wanted to learn Chi Sao, talk about this. And he goes, "I came to teach you the secret part, that all these empty hand motions, the reason you have to be a closed-door student, as they say, to learn this, is it's so deadly, because you learn that all your Wing Chun motions aren't grappling, aren't arm breaks, aren't empty hand punching. They're actually teaching the basics of how to use a blade. And once I teach it, I can't take it back." And no one wanted to listen. I have all this blade stuff. And when I met him, of course, we bonded. I spent extra time with him. And I went, "Oh," as soon as I saw it, I said, "Isn't this really blade work?" He goes, "You can see that." And I went, "Yes." So it's all Wing Chun of different types affected me. HEMA affected me. And going back to said what got me all tickled to do all this. Mm-hmm. For me, it's all a big connecting thread. I'm a knight at King Arthur's court, and people go, "You really are King Arthur." Dan Anderson is my Lancelot, because Lancelot was obviously not British.
Yeah.
He's French. He was on his own. Dan was my first, and I just knighted him last year, my first guardian of the night, because he has his own style, his own stuff, but he does my stuff as well. And he became my first knight after I was made a lord, because legally I'm Lord Bram. And, everything ties together for me. And I have a very old-fashioned code of ethics. God did not give me a 0-0 license. And people go, "What does that mean?" I said, we all know 007. There's obviously 1 up to 7 and people past him. But James Bond is 007.
Yeah.
And the 00 license gives him the right to kill. Nobody gave me a 00 license. Now, I believe in the old Torah version, "Thou shalt not commit murder." We obviously knew we had to kill bad guys. It's not "thou shalt not kill."
Yeah.
"Thou shalt not commit murder." But in real, because of legality, I understand in a war zone, we have rules in war of who we can kill. So I always go, I do not have an indiscriminate 00 license, and I teach people to respect human life. So I teach that even with blades, and I found, like I said, that less than lethal cutting using my biomechanical shutdown, which is a trademark thing for me and registered with the Library of Congress. My whole methodology is registered with the Library of Congress. And people go, "You didn't invent those moves," some of it. I said, but the terminology and how I apply them was registered and trademarkable.
Nice.
It's like, Siddle with a pressure point, PPCT. Yeah. He did an arm bar and trademarked it. And someone said, or, registered it. And someone said, "You can't do that." Well, his entry to it was unique to him. Once you get to an arm bar is an arm bar. You're putting pressure against the Golgi tendon and bending it back. End of story.
Yeah.
And you could be, on the back, on the front, back and front, up and lower. Doesn't matter. We're still bending against the technically the elbow and the Golgi tendon. But how we got there, that was unique. And I tell people my terminology of 1-4-12, 2-3-12, decision and switch points, my modules and my common element, because I'm an old Legos guy. They have to have a common element. And that's what's different between me and groupings with Bobby. Anything can be in a group. Bobby teaches groupings. They don't necessarily match up. And groupings, Bobby's groupings in Balintawak, Bobby Tabata, Grandmaster Remy Presas, Guillermo's system is the best grouping I've ever seen. Nice. He's also the last of my living older brothers, because he was Remy's friend, and I
Okay.
He's been my older brother for many, many years, and I love him dearly. He opens I'm in his books. I'm honored. He carries my knives. But modular means you have to have a common element. So with me, if there's a common element, like I have 1-2-2 high line, 1-4-12 low line. Well, on the 1, start a chaos, I can switch either high line or low line. Wherever there's a 2 is a common element. How I got that was training with Remy on my back porch. And he said we're going to do whatever certain drill. And he would seamlessly switch to another drill. When I learned stuff from, like with Guru Dana stuff, they learned about stealing a beat. Only Remy never stole the beat. I went, I don't get this. And I watched, and where there was the same move in a couple different drills, he would just on that same move, what I call a common element, or like a Lego, they got to fit in and out of it. He would move to the next one. And I got hit a lot. And he goes, oh, Bram, what do you do? I said, I'm watching you. Watch what? Well, you just changed your... No, I did not. He was so seamless, he couldn't tell he switched up.
Wow.
And I'd look at it because he'd go back to the original drill on that same move. So there's no steal a beat. There's no pause. And I went, oh, and then it clicked. My martial arts methodology is modular. The parts interchange. And it found that there's no panic. You're never wrong because you're always there. As Remy said, oh, you were there already. Mm-hmm. And when I talk about being sort of what they say legally a genius, I suck at music. I suck at basic math. I'm better in geometry. Okay, I'm a lot better. But in sort of what you call non-Euclidean conceptual movement in space, I'm really good at that.
Nice.
And it's helped me with my knives and what I teach because I teach biomechanical motion within a confined space. I can see it. I can feel it. I show people about body rotation and hip rotation. It's like if I stand square to you, Brian, and I stick my hands out and I'm about 8 inches from you and I can't reach you, how do I decide to reach you? Do you go step up? I said, no, I step back. I step 1 foot back and said, what do you mean? Then I tell people, try it. So if I step back, Brian says, oh, Bram stepped away from me. Well, by stepping away from you, that puts one hip in front of the other and extends my shoulder. So I went from I can't reach you to I can tap you. So we look up. I can actually hit your head. So I can fake hit your head. And guess what's right in front of me? Your hand. I just want your hand. So I fake you out and ganyo because I step back. That put me closer to you. I step back to get closer. And then I take care of your hand. And I make you the Black Knight. I win.
Nice.
And that's how you get modular.
I got a few fun questions we use to wrap it up here. So,
okay,
who are like 3 or 4 names you would put on your personal Mount Rushmore of martial arts?
Of course, Remy.
Yep.
I put William Chung up there.
Nice.
Clarence Murray, because he's... Oh, by the way, one little thing about Clarence. Years later, I called Clarence and said, do you remember me? And he goes, Bram, I really remember. He goes, I followed your career. He goes, you're what every instructor wants. You far exceeded me. That was a joke. And we became best friends after that.
Nice.
That's after, cool. Decades later. But yeah, so Clarence is up there.
Okay.
And a personal, they affect me. And right now, Bobby Tabata, because we share. But those are people within my personal life that I can say. As friends, next tier down has to be Dan Anderson, Graciela, and Chad and Bruce and Brian, who I share with.
Nice. Okay. How about a favorite martial arts book?
Favorite martial arts book. Just so you know, I have almost 4,000 martial arts books.
I know, and you mentioned like one of the favorite ones you ever bought.
So that's what I was about to say. It's still in front of me. So overall, that I go back to and love looking at, because I got a bunch of them, is Nishiyama's Old Shotokan, Empty Hands. Just because it was one of my first, and it'll always be one of my loves.
That is cool.
And like I said, I have lots and lots of books. Of course, and it's just something about it. So it's stuck. I still have my very first book on arms and armor too, that I got in like 5th grade, and says to my mom going, I know you looked for this book. And I still have my very first book on Greek myths.
Nice.
So
that's cool.
Yeah.
You like books like me. So, all right. How about a favorite martial arts TV show?
Well, people laugh. I still like the old Kung Fu with David Carradine. I have no bad feelings about David Carradine.
Yep.
And I've seen lots of the Shaw Brothers movies, but as for a TV show, and I've seen, Chuck's cool.
Yeah.
In Texas Ranger, and Hemo Sung, for I forgot what the name of the show is, but
Martial Law.
Yes. Martial Law, and I've seen those in replays. I never saw them, and even Lorenzo Lamas and Renegade.
Renegade, yeah.
Okay, but overall favorite still has to be, for good or bad, was the old Kung Fu with David Carradine.
Good. Well, a lot of people picked that one, so that's not a bad pick.
Yeah.
All right. How about favorite martial arts movie? You've seen a lot of them, I know.
Yeah. I like the Brothers 2. These two brothers meet up after, I forgot the actual name. But overall, again, it's got to be, I still like Enter the Dragon.
Nice. Love it too.
Yeah.
All right. Final question. Any movie you've ever seen, favorite movie fight scene?
Favorite movie fight scene. Okay, so just so you know, my favorite movie of all time is Forbidden Planet.
Nice.
Okay, absolutely. And I've seen it thousands of times. I used to watch a $1 million movie, WR, 6 times a day or more, whatever they could fit in a day for the whole week. I used to drive my family nuts.
Awesome.
But for fight scene, I really think the sword fight between the Sheriff of Nottingham and Robin Hood in the original Robin Hood with Errol Flynn.
I think you're the second person that's picked that. That is cool.
I saw it when I was a kid at Yale University on a big screen at the student center with my dad.
Oh.
I was a young kid. I loved that. And that's the closest to Howard Pyle's version of Robin Hood.
Okay.
The story.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you notice I didn't even, that's my favorite scene. It has stuck with me forever.
Yep. That is cool. Awesome. Well, Bram, this has been amazing. I mean, seriously, wow. what a life. And you're an amazing storyteller for sure. This has been so much fun. You definitely made my job easy on this one. I didn't have to say much. I mean, literally I had a list of like 8 questions and you answered all of them without me asking them. So that's kind of cool. it'll make editing a little easier.
Well, now think what I told you about George when I met George Denson. He went, Oh my God, you're a natural.
Yeah.
You just so you know, and you've seen it now. So you can always, when you call me back later and you've seen I come to life on here or on video.
Yeah.
And that's a God-given gift. But I'm glad you liked it. And yes, a lot of times, and I give you permission, all the people hear me, you can go, Bram, shut up. Or, because like you said, hey, we got to get to these questions because I'll talk. I'm a storyteller. Yep. I love talking.
That's good. And as of right now, tentatively, your episode should come out June 20th if I can get it edited in time. We'll see. Okay, it might be a week or two later. We'll see if I can get it done in time.
No worries. That weekend, I'll be at the annual Remy Presas Hall of Flame, like the Eternal Flame.
Awesome.
Donating my time for that weekend in Remy's honor at the Remy Presas Legacy, according to his will that he asked us to do this.
Very cool.
So I'll be there. So that'd be good timing.
Cool. Well, I truly appreciate your time, and I can't wait to get this episode out for people to listen to.
Good. And, like I said, anytime you want to, give me a buzz. If you want to talk to me video, you're on my personal cell. Call me anytime or talk to me anytime you want.
I will do that. I will definitely stay in touch.
Okay. Thank you, Brian. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you, all you listeners.
Thanks for listening to Everyday Martial Artist. We hope you will join us every week for a brand new episode with a different martial artist telling their story. If you enjoy the show, be sure to leave us a review. Also, be sure to check out our website at everydaymartialartist.com. There you can find all of our episodes and contact us to suggest guests and ask questions. Again, thanks for listening to Everyday Martial Artist, and we'll see you next week.